Weld beads are one of the most exposed parts on armored vehicles. In many cases they stand out from their flat surfaces, which makes them prone to chipping. Chipping in our scale modeling language is when the paint chips off and exposes the surface underneath, which in most cases is metal. I've already shown you how to paint steel chips and basic rust effects, so now I'm gonna explain how to chip weld beads. What's up mates, so in this video I'm gonna show you one of the less popular techniques, although I honestly don't understand why literally no one is doing this, because if you take a look at any tank or armored vehicle, be it T-72, Abrams or anything newer or older, they always have these cool looking silver-ish chipping effects on top of their weld lines. Like I already said, welds are one of the most exposed parts and are one of the first things that can get chipped. My mountain bike could tell you about it. And they are very specific because welds are in like 99%, I'm no welder so go easy on me, made from non-corrosive metals. You can find photos of completely rusted out tanks somewhere in a desert or on a shooting range and you'll see all the weld lines shining like crazy. I first did this on my M36 Jackson after seeing its welds chipped in my reference photos. I wish I could show you all the references I have for this, but unfortunately, as some of you might already know, photos like those are copyrighted and I want to play a fair game with my channel, so I cannot and won't show those in my videos. I'm really sorry for that, but you'll just have to trust me. In the past I used to paint welds as one of the last finishing touches, but as time progressed I realized that they should be painted earlier in the weathering process. So I think the best time to apply them is after you're done with chipping, so paint your model, apply filters, oil dots, washes, chipping, and then you can start with the weld beads. And then continue with rust stones, dust and so on and so forth. Also please note that this effect doesn't replicate raw weld beads. Those have a lot of rust and burnt stains around them, and I'm certainly gonna show you how to do that in another video. This technique is just about normal, so to say, welds covered in paint, which was later worn off. So let's get started. You can use any acrylic paint for this task, water-based or lacquer, and the selection is very wide on today's market. I'm a little bit old school in this manner because the only metallic paints I have are Tamiya X11 Chrome Silver and Mr. Hobby Chrome Silver. Tamiya is quite decent, but Mr. Hobby is probably the best metallic paint I ever had the pleasure to use. It has great coverage and can be polished into absolutely insane shine. You can technically use enamels as well, but I'm not sure if those would stay in place when you'll be later adding enamel rust or dust tones on top of them. Mr. Hobby is very opaque, therefore can be used sparingly, so it will last you for several years. Because it dries very fast, 2 drops of acrylic drying retarder are needed to make it more workable. And 1 drop of lacquer thinner will make it easier to apply with a paintbrush. Now you can see how weird this color is. Those metallic particles just keep moving around all the time, it's like some alien nanotechnology or something. And the paint will eventually settle down, so you'll have to mix it every 10 minutes or so. And because this technique is very precise, you should pick your finest brush. My favorite is this Vallejo 000, which I use for chipping and any other technique that requires maximum control. But before we start, let's see what our options are with this model. There are several exposed welds that will get chipped by the crew walking around. Note that there are 2 types of welds. Those which I made myself from 2-part putty, aka these. And if you want to know how to make those, I have a detailed video tutorial on that. So if you haven't seen it, check it out by clicking on this card. And the other type are those which were already in the kit. Almost every modern kit has those, so that's a pretty cool thing, huh? Now it's very important to decide where you should paint those worn welds. Using your previously painted chipping on the rest of the model as a guide can be a huge help. It should also be quite obvious that welds on the sides won't get that much traffic, so naturally there will be less chipping. Not to mention those welds in corners, those probably shouldn't have any chips at all. So let's start with those pre-molded kit welds. They have very nice shape, and the dark wash, which makes the weld line pop, is also a good guide because it's showing us the most exposed parts of the weld bead. Note how careful I am, making sure to apply only small amounts of paint. If I had too much paint in my brush and it accidentally spilled around the weld, that would be a total disaster and I don't even want to think about it. Also, the combination of dark wash applied around the weld bead and the silver painted on top of it makes this detail really pop out, even on a light colored vehicle like this. The results are, at least in my opinion, pretty cool. A simple technique like this can add so much detail and visual interest to your model. And hey, you can use this technique to paint, fake weld beads. Those thin lines should also have weld detail, but there's none, and I kind of forgot to add it myself, but it's still very easy to create a sort of non-existing detail. Alright then, let's take a look at those more gnarly welds. Like I said before, those are sculpted from 2-part putty and have much deeper texture. So in this case I'm using those dark corroded chips as a guide, and basically when there's a large chip, I paint the weld completely with silver, because it indicates lots of wear in that part. In places with less chips I only touch the most raised parts of the weld bead and also try to make the effect irregular. Something like this. You might notice that the effect isn't so evident on those welds. That's because they have more texture, so they reflect light in more directions. In other words, it's also partially because of the paint itself. This metallic paint isn't just silver, but it also reflects light. That means the effect will be more visible under certain angles, which will make observing your models more exciting. Not just for you, but for other viewers as well. So again, to summarize the basics of this technique. Use some nice metallic paint which is bright. Silver, chrome silver, whatever. If it's a good quality paint, it will actually be metallic, so it will have that nice metal shine. Paint only the most exposed weld beads, aka those that stick out from the surface and are most likely to get chipped by the crew walking around the tank or by branches, walls and other stuff that can damage the paint on sides of the tank. Speaking of those, it's quite obvious that people won't be walking on vertical surfaces of the tank. That means these welds will have very little to no chipping at all. In this case, in order to create a more natural looking result, I'm again following the dark rusty chipping painted near the weld bead. If the paint got chipped on the armor plate, it would definitely go off the weld as well. In some cases you might feel like the effect is too strong or that it doesn't look very authentic, and I'm gonna show you how to fix that in a few seconds. But first make sure to clean your brush with lacquer thinner. Even if you think it's clean, it can still hold metallic particles inside, so I often use another brush to wipe any remnants out. Of course, it's important to follow the bristles so you won't damage the fine tip, just like this. Okay, so now we can take a look at the model and check if we made any mistakes and if we should tone the effect down here and there, or if there's any texture that we covered up with paint. If you accidentally miss the weld and add silver on top of the armor plate, it's easy to fix that by covering it with dark steel chipping. If the silver chipping itself looks a bit off, there's a very easy fix. Just take the same enamel wash you used before on the entire model and gently apply it over the weld beads. Your chipping might look too blotchy, for example, and in that case, the dark wash will make it look sharper and will also slightly tone down the shiny silver look. If you added large spots of wear on purpose and there are sections of weld lines that are completely silver, which might look a little boring, for example, wash will emphasize their texture. And of course, don't forget to blend any excess that spilled out. You can also partially remove the wash from the weld by gently tapping it with a brush and small amount of enamel thinner. You'll often have to go back and forth between techniques in order to obtain a nice looking result. And that's all I wanted to tell you, my mates. Now you can continue weathering the entire model with rust tones, dust, streaking effects, mud and anything else you might think of. For some reason there are not many people using this technique, at least at the time of recording this, so who knows, maybe in 5 years it will become one of the most mainstream weathering techniques. Hopefully thanks to this video. But anyway, I hope you found this video helpful or at least interesting to watch, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, because I have more content like this coming your way. Thank you all for watching, I'll see you mates in the next one, and here are some bloopers. Those pretty cool. Please give me a thumbs up. Of course, it's important to follow the braces of. That means these welds will have. So I often use. There are several exposed welds that would get chipped by crew walking around. Weld beads are one of the most exposed parts on armor. Blah. I'm a little bit old school in this manner because the only metallic paints I have are Tamiya. There are several exposed welds that would get chipped by the crew walking. Be it T-72, Abrams, or anything never or older.